So now I think it's time to finish and to conclude. I will call on stage José Luis Dacus Vilassa. José Luis is a managing partner at Cruz Vilassa Advocados and also former judge of the Court of Justice of the European Union. So we have asked him to conclude and wrap up a bit what the debates. So that's the floor is yours, and thank you very much for.
Thank you very much, Christian. Okay, thank you. Well, now I feel more comfortable. Good afternoon, everyone. This is not really a comfortable position to be the last speaker at this conference. Everything has been... Oh, sorry. Is it working? Okay, thank you. Everything has already been said, so it remains. It doesn't remain very much to be said. I will also have to go back to some of the issues that have been debated and that have been at the center of some interventions in this conference. But before that, I very much would like to thank you for inviting me to come and for giving me the honor of closing this conference. And also congratulations for the impeccable organization. Also for this Luxembourgish weather, which reminded me of some other countries where I used to live, like Portugal, for instance. But having lived for 16 years in Luxembourg, this was exactly the winter weather that I liked to have when I was in Luxembourg. This was really my favorite time in Luxembourg, was when it was like this. Thank you very much for having also so well organized this detail of the organization. I must begin my remarks by disclosing two facts. Firstly, I have been, as has been said, a member of the Court of Justice of the European Union as Advocate General and as judge for 16 years. But I am now, I am not anymore a member of the court, so I'm free and never have sitted in a case about football. Not in Bosman, was when Ian acted in the Bosman case. I was president of the court of first instance, not the general court, so we didn't cross at that time. But now I'm entirely free to express my opinions. Actually, I did it at the hearing because I had the privilege of representing the Portuguese Republic as a lawyer at the hearing before the Court of Justice on the 11th and 12th of July concerning exactly the European Super League. And I was impressed by the fact that 24 member states of the European Economic Area submitted written or oral observations, or both, to the court, which, of course, bears witness to the importance they attach to the issue at stake. And moreover, the views expressed by them, by all them, at least during the hearing. I could explain why I say at least during the hearing, but we have no time. Were unanimously in favor of the compatibility with EU law of the UEFA rules at issue, excepting one that has already been mentioned, in particular sanctions applied to players that were not involved in the project of setting up a rival league. Of course, I was acting on behalf of the Portuguese government, but the positions I expressed at the time, it happens that they coincide exactly with mine. So they may be considered as also my own positions. And it happens that I haven't changed my mind in the meantime. Second disclosure, as the great Spanish thinker of the 20th century, Ortega y Gasset, wrote, each person is him or herself and his circumstance. I was born in Braga, a town in the north of Portugal, and I do not exclude this may be part of my circumstance. I'm sure this is part of my circumstance. I have been, and I still am, a fan of Sporting Braga. And Sporting Braga, which is currently classified third in the Portuguese championship, but was in the past oscillating between the first and the second Portuguese leagues, is now, year on year, a regular candidate to the main UEFA leagues. But I guess it would hardly been admitted to play, it would ever been hardly admitted to play in the European Super League. Different sports which are organized, this has been said so far, different sports which are organized at European level have chosen the structure and the working rules that they consider the most suitable in view of the characteristics of the sporting activity and which they consider more conform with their objectives and organizational preferences. My short talk will be about a topic, I'm sorry, I must come back to there, about what I would call a constitutional view of European football. Once again, we have to go back to the constitutionality or the constitutionalization of sport at the level of the treaties. I've written several articles on the constitutionalization of the treaties. This has nothing to do with the constitutionalization of the treaties, but it's a small part of it. I actually am in this respect in the good and honorable company of Advocate General Rantos. In his opinion, it was the first time an official document of the Court of Justice written by an Advocate General spoke of the constitutional dimension of the sport, but allow me to remember that modestly this same idea was put forward by the representative of the Portuguese Republic during the hearing. What I'm going to do is mainly to try to draw some inferences and to give this concept a meaning and to draw the inferences that it is possible to draw from it. It's not just a word, but it shall imply some changes. From the outset, because unlike in previous cases, even in Bosman, where specific rules applicable applicable mainly to the relations between clubs and their players were questioned before the Court of Justice. The European Super League case touches the heart of the system of rules currently regulating inter-clubs competitions in Europe. I will now try to simplify at my own risk, thus avoiding to add complexity to what is already complex enough. And please do not expect me to predict the outcome of the case, even though the analytical tools that I normally use are well known to the court. But I will make no guess about that. We already know, I don't need to come to that. I could come very, very briefly and give you my own version of the main features of the what is known as the European sporting model, but it has been already declined in several tones during this conference. I will not go back to there, the pyramidal structure and what that means, the open system of open competitions. The pyramidal model is also means of making competition work at the European and world level. How could you do otherwise to have to organize and harmonize competitions? Solidarity and redistribution mechanism. And I will just insist in another point is the system of governance, which is a representative and professional system, which includes, and this, in my view, it's important, an impartial and independent internal dispute settlement mechanism under the control of national and EU courts in their respective jurisdictions when they come into play, which is the case now with the European Super League. Unless, of course, it is a matter of strictly sporting nature, essentially the so-called rules of the game. It is true, as has already been mentioned, that the European sporting model is not precisely defined in the treaty. But we know what are the values, and they are in some way in Article 165. We know what are the values inherent in it, and the building blocks of such model are finally there. Fairness and openness in sporting competitions, cooperation between bodies responsible for sport, and the protection of the physical and moral integrity of sportsmen and sportswomen, especially the youngest. And moreover, as has been already highlighted, since football is a sport based on the interdependence of competitors, the maintenance of a certain competitive balance is essential in order to maintain the interest of spectators may have in the competition. But let me begin by setting the scene clearly. FIFA was founded in 1904. This is 119 years ago. And UEFA in 1954, around 69 years ago. And they were created on the initiative of civil society, more precisely by those directly interested in organizing at national and supranational level the practice of a sporting game that was becoming increasingly popular, particularly in the United Kingdom and in continental Europe. They were set up as private, non-profit associations of international scope with headquarters in Switzerland and governed by Swiss law. Clearly, an organization of this size and ambition could not do without rules and statutes able to ensure it operated in the best and most appropriate conditions. I'm not able to open my bottle. Strong man, thank you. It is, and in this context, I think very clearly that it is not up to anyone other than the institutions representing the federations and clubs to choose within their own ecosystem the type of organization of sporting activity that they prefer, in the light of their objectives and the specific characteristics of their activity. It was therefore in the exercise of the fundamental freedoms of assembly and association, now enshrined in Article 12 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, that UEFA and FIFA were created and continue to maintain operating rules capable of ensuring that a system of competitions can function at regional, UEFA, and World FIFA level. In case Pio some years ago, the legitimacy of FIFA to adopt its players' agents regulations was contested, based on the argument that such rules did not have a sport-related object, but regulated an economic activity that was peripheral to its sporting activity. The situation in this case, the ESL case, is totally different. And there is absolutely no reason to consider that the contested rules, in my view, are not directly connected with the organization of sport at European and global level, and would not fall within the scope of the freedom of internal organization enjoyed by sports associations like FIFA and UEFA, as was recognized by the Court of Justice. This does not mean, as the court has also made clear, both in Liège and in Letonen, that in the exercise of their organizational autonomy, these institutions are exempted from the mandatory rules adopted either by their respective states or by the European Union. The European sports model cannot be equated to a lawless territory. It's another way to say something that has already been said this afternoon. In any case, it's not like a sporting exception. When those rules and statutes concern the exercise of an economic activity, they may be caught by rules on competition and the rules on the internal market. But it's a normal relationship. They apply to economic activities, and it's only when they concern an economic activity that they may be caught by those rules. So far, I could say that there is nothing new under the sun. However, and now that's why that's on the central point of my talk. Something has changed after the Lisbon Treaty has introduced Article 165 in the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union. It has rightly been at the center of several interventions this afternoon. Then sport has been added to the list of subjects, education, vocational training, and youth, that were included in Article 149 of the Treaty on the European Communities. And I think it was my expression I used during the hearing, this elevated sport to the status of a subject with constitutional dignity. And in my view, as I said, this cannot fail to have important legal consequences for the application of the treaties. Such change did not happen by chance or from one moment to the next. It has already been recalled that it was the result of a process which has been announced and encouraged and promoted by the Union's political institutions, from the Amsterdam Declaration on Sport of 1997 or the Helsinki Report of 1999, to the Commission's White Paper of 2007, and upheld by the Court of Justice in several judgments. This process of constitutionalization of the phenomenon of the sport in the Union was intended to respond to the changes which, for better or for worse, had resulted from the actions of the actors of the mass social process linked to certain sports, in particular to football. The growing commercialization of sport, the violence sometimes associated with sporting passion, and the marginalization of certain social groups, particularly in times of economic and social crisis, have increased the concern of civil society, states, international organizations, and the EU. Transposed into the text of Article 165, the concerns arising therefrom expressed themselves in the reference to the specific nature of sport. In my view, the significance of this is twofold. First of all, the need to preserve the integrity of the European sporting model requires, in accordance with the horizontal logic of interpretation, that where an economic activity is carried out in relation to sport, Articles 101, 102, and internal market rules be read in conjunction, not only apply, but also be read in conjunction with Article 165. Secondly, any potential infringement of the competition rules by UEFA regulations can be considered as established only after a thorough analysis of its effects. Any qualification, this was discussed in the Advocate General Ranto's opinion, only after a thorough analysis of its effects, any qualification of a given practice as an infringement by object, an infringement per se, being excluded, in my view, in light of the constitutional recognition of the legitimacy of the objectives pursued by those regulations in the whole. This equation was particularly well elucidated in a judgment of some years ago, Wouters, in paragraph 97 of Wouters, for which I wrote the observations of the Portuguese Republic on behalf of the Portuguese bar, on the basis of which I really recommend you this paragraph 97, which finally gives the key for this equation, on the basis of which it is possible to conclude, and only on the basis of which, if and when the possible effects restrictive of competition are or are not inherent in the pursuit of the objectives aimed by FIFA and UEFA. As you see, this is finally not written in detail in the treaty, but in my view is the best reading for applying Article 65. And it is a very operational way of reading the article. Finally, it's not just a declaration. It's something with practical implications for the application of the treaties. Having come to this point, I have just a final question, which remains also to be considered. And it's the question that has been mentioned so far during the last panel of the proportionality of the measures at stake. The proportionality to the extent that they may be liable to produce anti-competitive effects. Forget the anti-competitive object of these rules, these particular rules that we are dealing with in this case. But proportionality, the proportionality test to be made to the extent that those rules may be liable to produce anti-competitive effects or are not based on objective, transparent, and non-discriminatory criteria, or are deemed to be excessive. I think that with the already mentioned exception of the sanctions applicable to players not involved in the project of a breakaway league, the concrete measures under debate are necessary, and I'm following the opinion of the Advocate General, are necessary, appropriate, and proportionate to the legitimate objectives they pursue. Why? Mainly because they do not prevent the creation of any independent league and are merely intended to prevent dual membership, where the promoters of a new competition, not authorized by a European governing body, simply want to secure for themselves the best of two worlds. And I think this is legitimate. In addition, the promoters and funding clubs of a breakaway league, and many of their star players, have important financial resources and a degree of autonomy that gives them considerable bargaining power, and a degree, I would say, a large degree of autonomy in deciding to set up a rival European competition outside the FIFA-UEFA ecosystem. This is not only a theoretical possibility, it is a practical possibility. They have the means to do it. If they don't do it, it's because they don't want, or they finally recognize that it's not easy. Be it as it may, I do not think, and this is a slight twist that has not been made so far. I didn't yet see it written. I do not think that any proportionality test should be left to the discretion of national courts, as Advocate General Rantos suggests in different occasions in his opinion, both in direct actions for annulment, as in the International Skate Union case, and in references for preliminary ruling, as in the ESL case. It is, in my view, for the Court of Justice itself to carry out the test. In such cases, what is at stake, is not the proportionality of any domestic rule of a member state. It may vary between the member states, of course. Each one has its own regulations. And for those, for assessing the proportionality of those rules, the national court is generally the best place the best place to do it. It's normal that the Court of Justice refers the final test of proportionality to the referring judge, because it's closer to the facts of the case and to the application that it has to do of the national law. But here it is a different thing. At stake is an assessment to be made on the proportionality and compatibility with EU law of rules adopted by interstate bodies involving European competitions with a global or European dimension. I don't see how those rules could be uniformly applied if the proportionality test was referred to any national judge. So those rules must be given a uniform interpretation, which only the Court of Justice can ensure. And it is nothing new, because the Court of Justice, when it feels the need to do it, it does it. It performs the test, and generally it refrains from doing it. But when it is really important, the court itself gives, in any case, all the indications to the national judge on how to apply the proportionality test. And I think it is the case here. Within this framework, it is finally possible to reach a balance between sporting and economic and financial interests, capable of preventing the latter from hijacking an activity which has a profound economic, social, and educational impact on the fabric of European society and its regional cohesion, while at the same time safeguarding the health of athletes and the fairness of the practice of sport. It remains to be shown, let me put the thing this way, it remains to be shown that these objectives and values can be achieved within the framework of a closed system based on profit, which reserves places in the competition for the most powerful of the powerful, and which represents a fundamental rupture in the European institutional and social framework that has been painstakingly built up over decades. Now, just a final remark, inspired by previous panels. Please do not expect the court to answer all the questions that this system may raise, and questions that have also been raised here during this conference. The court and its role will answer the questions that have been put to it by the Spanish court. It will not go further than the scope of those questions, even though it is also used to refine the questions to give the most useful answer to the national court or to foster some options of judicial policy. That's the way the court works. It comes case by case, and the court sees the opportunity to set new principles and to make steps forward in the progress of EU law when it is given the opportunity to do so. Thank you very much for your attention.